Luca Bertuzzi, journalist, editor in The Digital, as the Directives website stated. There is no better person to talk about discussions and debates that are currently ongoing regarding the AI Act.
It's clearly not a regulation meant to protect human rights per se. They went to product safety legislation because that's what they know best, and that's basic. The basic idea of this commission is we want this technology, but not at all costs. I don't think innovation and regulation are necessarily mutually exclusive, but I do think there is a trade-off. Are technical standards the right tool to manage risk related to fundamental rights?
Welcome to the JUST-AI Jean Monnet Podcast, where esteemed experts from across the globe address the most pressing issues on AI technologies, their regulation, and the resolution of disputes involving them. Many questions come to mind when we think about the EU regulation in artificial intelligence known as the AI Act. This highly ambitious pioneering instrument seeks to set the global standard in AI regulation by suggesting a four-level taxonomy of risks ranging from non-high to unacceptable to so-called high-risk AI systems being those that arguably call for most caution as they present elevated risk of fundamental rights violations and are, by virtue of the AI Act, subject to strict safety requirements. Though a laudable first, the AI Act is not without its flaws. The lengthy discussions and amendments of this regulation showed a lack of consensus within the EU legislature on how to best protect fundamental rights by applying the tried and true product safety regulatory logic. No one is better placed to talk about the tumultuous negotiations surrounding the AI Act than Luca Bertuzzi, an independent journalist in the field of new technologies. In this episode of the JUST-AI Jean Monnet Podcast, Luca gives us a glimpse behind the scenes, astutely commenting on the ratio legis of the AI Act, but also highlighting possible shortcomings in this regulation's future application. So join us as we explore together with Luca the legal, economic, and political controversies which preceded but ultimately shaped the AI Act as it is today.
In the midst of many discussions and debates that are currently ongoing regarding the AI Act, there is probably no better person to talk about it than Luca Bertuzzi, who is formerly an editor in The Digital, as the Directives website stated. And you know, I've been personally a big fan of your work and very, very grateful for finally a comprehensible version of the AI Act, which we have thanks to you. But we will talk about it in a minute. We usually start these podcasts by allowing our guests to present themselves, present a little bit about their background, and in particular, in your case, how did you get involved with new technologies? How did you develop the interest in new technologies, and how did that then lead to journalism and you know, journalist work in that field?
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, I've been working at Directives for the past 3 years. I've only recently departed from the publication. So there I was the technology editor, where I oversaw a team of 3 reporters based in Paris, Berlin, and Brussels, of course. So I mean, I've been responsible for the whole editorial coverage on technology, and I also had the privilege to keep the most important files for myself, such as the Act, which was presented literally 2 days after I started at Directives. How I ended up in journalism? Well, I've always wanted to be a journalist. I did some freelance work during my university studies. Then I landed in Brussels to work at the European Commission for a traineeship, after which I was a consultant for around 3 years, also working on digital. So then I saw this opening at Directives, and I thought it was a great opportunity to enter the journalist route more professionally in this case. So yeah, this is how I ended up here. It was quite a coincidence of factors, but I guess that's always the case.
Were new technologies always a point of focus in your training and in your traineeship at the European Commission and your previous work? Was it always something that you were drawn by?
No, actually, I specialized at LSE on political communication. And there, of course, I had the opportunity to study also how social media were reshaping our public sphere, the unintended consequences of new media. So academically, I was always a bit fascinated by the role of technology in society, and especially how, the communication technology has changed the way society operates and social relations are expressed. So, that has always been in the back of my mind. But this fascination with technology came with the work, actually.
Okay. Okay. Well, speaking of the work, you mentioned that the AI Act proposal was submitted very early on as it pertains to your work at Euractiv. So I wanted to start off the conversation with some of your thoughts maybe on the AI Act as such, and then I would like to kind of tackle some of the maybe behind the scenes information pertaining to the discussion around the AI Act. In our Center of Excellence, some of us have been quite critical of this instrument, especially in its approach of combining risk regulation and a risk-based approach to regulation and rights-based approach to regulation. So I was curious to know, what do you think personally the greatest risks are that are related to AI in general, and do you think that the European Commission addressed those risks adequately in the AI Act, both the initial version and the now final version of this instrument?
Well, I think that all of us, as far as technology is concerned, is limited in their condition of their times and the historical elements we have to judge the current situation, predict the future one. So, the Commission approach is quite traditional. Because it follows product safety regulation, and it tries to adapt that to a new kind of product that can change throughout the life cycle. It's clearly not a regulation meant to protect human rights per se. For that, you would have other instruments like the Council of Europe Convention, which unfortunately is being flattened out as per the AI Act. For example, there is no agency for the subjects of those that suffer a decision from an AI system in the AI Act. I think the Commission did its best in terms of conceptualizing potential risks, and I do not pretend to know which are the risks that will escape the final version of the AI Act, because I think we are just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what this technology can do, how independent it can become, and how pervasive it will be in our day-to-day life. I think the European Parliament insisted correctly in having foundation models covered in, just because it wouldn't make sense to do law on AI right now without covering foundation models. So, and maybe in 5 years' time, we won't be talking about foundation models anymore. We will be talking about the new frontier AI, even though I hate this terminology. So I think what Andrea Renda once told me is definitely true, that a lot of things in the AI Act, like Article 5, Annex 3, they're written in the sand. What matters will be how the governance architecture of the AI Act will manage to meet new challenges, will manage to keep the pulse on the scientific community, on the business community, and try to anticipate risks before they become systemic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are several points that you just raised in what you were saying, and I kind of want to go back to this idea of risk and the idea of governance. Who is charged with assessing the risk and identifying the risk and ideally preventing it? So, one of the in our work, one of the main points of criticism was precisely the way that risk was defined and was taxonomized. I mean, as you know, there are 4 levels of risk, high risk systems being kind of the centerpiece of the AI Act. But if you look at the public consultation that was conducted by the European Commission, there's really no strong evidence that really warrants the fact that there are 4 levels of risk. And you rightfully pointed out that the European Commission is traditional in a sense that it's implemented a tried and true method of product safety to products that are intelligent as opposed to automated merely, right? So what do you think about how the European Commission or what do you or those around you think about how the European Commission defined the notion of risk? And how it taxonomized it? Do you think that it is something that corresponds to market realities or not?
So here we are going to a conceptual level that, to be honest with you, I never had the time to go too much in depth myself. I think, the level of how to put it, the commission was rather basic, right? They went to product safety legislation because that's what they know best. And with that, they took a level of risk based on, fundamental rights, health, and safety. And that's basic, right? And then all of the sudden, during the negotiations, they came up with this idea of systemic risk, which is somehow drawn from the DSA, the Digital Services Act. Because the idea there was basically, let's give the Commission the competence on very large online platforms, now on foundation models that have a systemic risk. So, we have centralized enforcement. Of course, this was seen as a power grab opportunity from the Commission itself. But here you really see the lack of maturity, I would say, in terms of conceptualizing what is a systemic risk, partially because this was rushed, of course, very hectic weeks of negotiations. And what also struck me is you might have seen this note from the Belgian presidency where they say, we included this mention of potential risk for democracy and the rule of law, but we don't repeat it anywhere else in the Act. It's just in the recital. So, it really comes as an afterthought, and, it's like some minor concession to the parliament. So, it's, again, there is a risk that we don't see what is the cumulative effect of individual risks at the societal level. And this is something, that we have seen with social media before, and that if it's not managed correctly, might backfire further down the line.
Yeah, which kind of it's also, I think, very interesting, very relevant that you brought up the DSA, because indeed, and this kind of goes back to the governance idea, Because as is the case with the DSA, in the AI Act, the operators themselves, providers and users mostly, are the ones who are charged with kind of monitoring and assessing the risks. So do you think that, and you also mentioned that the European Commission did what it knows how to do, which is product safety regulation. But do you think there was an alternative mode of regulation? And have you maybe branched out to other countries and other regions, and for example, the US or China, and how they approach regulation of AI? Of course, the EU being kind of the pioneer, right, in terms of seeking to set the gold standard. But so what do you think about the governance models? Do you think that they will be efficient, as you mentioned earlier? And was there an alternative way of regulating AI if we look outside of Europe and maybe kind of have a critical view on what other countries have done and what the EU might have done?
Yeah, so I think there are 3 or 4 questions in there. From the international level, I think what the US is doing is very interesting, but of course it's just an executive order, can be canceled at any time, and only applies to federal agencies. So at best, it can influence the tech sector via public procurement. And, there is no guarantee that a future president might confirm it. China is, of course, an interesting example, but they are going more vertical. They're regulating specific types of AI, like generative AI, and also the type of values intrinsic to their legislation is not really compatible with the Western values. In terms of could the AI Act be different? Well, actually, the parallel that comes to mind is the Digital Markets Act. So for those following the DMA, this is meant to be a set of ex-ante rules that prevents big tech from monopolizing, leveraging their market power in where they're already dominant to dominate emerging sectors and markets. So what happened there actually is that the Commission based the entire DMA on past antitrust cases. So on markets that have already been concentrated and the position of the gatekeepers is entrenched. And in new markets, like cloud, AI, the Commission is not able to actually move the dial because they are very risk adverse and they say there is not enough evidence. Well, when there will be evidence, it will be too late. So, if you look at the UK in competition law, they've taken a much more flexible approach of codes of conduct that then become mandatory. Now, I think, we have, in a sense, I'm not gonna sing the praises of UK regulation because that's also not very successful recently. But I think we have something to learn in terms of providing the regulatory authority with flexibility to face new developments. I think, if you look at the decision establishing the AI office, I don't see any of that. It's more a task force of AI wishful thinking than anything else. So, it's almost like the Commission set himself for failure in enforcing the AI Act. And, there is only so much they can do in relying with external experts and so on. I think if this law is to leave a mark, I think they will have to take enforcement very seriously because, again, we are talking about the wealthiest companies in the world, one of the fastest growing markets in the world. So, they won't be waiting for the commission to say, oh, wait, what you're doing is not correct. The commission needs to be proactive, not reactive, and work well with national authorities as well.
So how would enforcement be improved under the AI Act?
Well, I think they need much more independence inside the commission, but also independence to say, okay, we looked at what you're doing, and we think this goes against the spirit of the AI Act. Therefore, we demand these corrective measures. And I think, to do that, you need a lot of confidence, political capital, and competences. Because I doubt, what I doubt the most is that the commission can gather, the computer scientists and data scientists that can actually tell them what these companies are doing. And they cannot just rely on, rivals bad mouthing each other. They need to have their own independent experts that can provide an accurate assessment of what is going on. And it's not easy, huh? I mean, again, mentioning the DSA, the idea of opening up algorithms is very new. There is a nascent market of auditors in
Yeah.
this area. We'll see more and more. I think, DSA auditors will pitch themselves as AI safety firms as well, and we can see more and more of those in the public domain. So,
Mm.
I think there needs to be a whole safety ecosystem in place, but also there needs to be leadership from both the commission and national authorities.
Okay. Okay. And to kind of as a final thought about the AI Act, and then we'll move on to kind of the more interesting, maybe intriguing parts of the negotiations leading up to the AI Act. You know, do you think that who is this instrument protecting ultimately at the end of the day? There's this. It's a market regulating instrument very clearly, but then it's kind of wrapped into this very attractive values human rights discourse. So what is the actual or true purpose of the AI Act in your opinion? To foster technology, to encourage greater AI use, or is this human rights protection really taken seriously by the European Commission?
I think it's neither of that. I think it's consumer protection,
Okay.
most of anything. Consumer protection, and the idea that the basic idea of this commission is we want this technology, but not at all costs, and at our own conditions. So, I think the European way of innovating via regulation, it actually comes, to me, it comes as a justification to say, yeah, okay, we're not regulating just because we don't have our own AI companies. I mean, I don't think innovation and regulation are necessarily mutually exclusive, but I do think there is a trade-off. So, this is not the way you develop successful AI companies. It's with a better industrial policy. So, I think if that was the objective, it clearly misses the mark.
Yeah.
I think the point here, it was just to say to European consumers, the AI systems that are used in Europe are safe. They won't discriminate you. So you can trust us to give the CE marking and say this thing was done according to our standards. Therefore, it's more reliable than, and probably they will be more reliable. We are seeing that with the DSA and DMA, that now big tech companies are giving better services to European consumers. So ultimately, and that's what I see as the objective.
Okay. Now, moving on to the negotiations, which you followed closely. What were I read some of your articles that were published on Euractiv, where namely you speak about the French reservation, right, in terms of the transparency obligations, etc. So, what were the main points of contention, and why ultimately did we end up with the AI Act as it looks now, as opposed to as it looked when the European Commission submitted it? And I have a few specific points that I wanna raise, but as kind of a general impression, what was why were the negotiations so arduous, and why did they have so many points of contention?
Well, it's an horizontal law.
Yeah.
It touches so many aspects that it's normal you have different points of view on several issues. The complexity, I think, was driven mostly by the fact that in the parliament there was a complex arrangement to begin with.
Yeah.
When you assign a file to a committee in the parliament, you're also saying which angle you want to follow, right? And the fact that there was both LIBE, which is focused on human rights basically, and IMCO, which is focused on consumer protection. Well, that tells us, there were both these angles. I think certain things like the law enforcement exemptions, they could have been predicted from the start, and indeed, like contentions around RBI, remote biometric identification, was, for everyone to see since the start. Even before the start, there was a resolution in the parliament that was quite divisive. And on top of that, you have the new complexity of foundation models, then became general purpose AI. How do you regulate something like this? How do you balance the need to pass a law before the legislative mandate with, finding a decent and solid text that everyone can agree with? I think, overall, given the enormous complexity and political pressure, I think they did a decent job. They'll probably, the text will need to be cleaned quite significantly by lawyer linguists, because there were some mistakes in the draft that are leaked. But I think overall, considering all the complexity and the things they had to deal with, I think they did quite a decent job overall.
Yes. The theme of the Center of Excellence is fairness, procedural fairness in particular. So we are some of us are very much interested in evidence, and AI liability, obviously. So what do you think of the effectiveness of the standards and rights now that target high-risk systems? For example, in the current version, there's the right to explanation, which is currently Article 68C of the AI Act, which echoes Article 22 GDPR. And so you have technical standards, and suddenly you have this subjective right, which kind of speaks to this hybrid approach to regulation, right? We mix risks and rights together, and we define risk as a potential of human rights violations. So one of the questions that I kind of asked myself is, well, will these standards be effective? The standards like human oversight and data governance and documentation, and the duty to transparency and the duty to provide explanation, et cetera, et cetera. Will this be practicable? Will this be feasible at the end of the day for all the actors involved in the programming use or deployment or import, etc., or distribution of AI systems? Or do you think that this will come at a cost, and only certain companies, like those that are targeted by the DMA, for example, will be able to actually comply with these standards?
So I think you raised different issues here. The first one is the compliance cost for companies. And I think, there is, when I mentioned there is a trade-off between innovation and regulation, that's exactly it. You raise the entry barrier for this market. I think the Digital SME Alliance estimated that the cost for an average SME would be around 100,000 euros, which is, of course, not something anyone can cover. But the discussion on standards is even broader, I would say, because the Commission has been trying. The standard setting in Europe is a bit of a black hole of the EU policy making, because you have these laws saying, you have to respect the fundamental rights of a person in your high-risk system, and how you operationalize it is you send a request for a standardization request to a body that is made up of engineers who have no idea about how fundamental rights should look like in practice. So, and on top of that, you have the fact that these are bodies driven by the industry, because standard setting is driven by the industry, usually by the big players of the industry who have more resources to invest on this. We have been discussing for a long time the need to make civil society participate more, SMEs participate more. It takes money, and no one is putting that on the table. The solution of the Commission has been, okay, let's exclude ETSI because it's too private sector driven, give it to Sensenelec, where national standardization bodies have the upper hand in voting rights. And then you go and look at what's inside these national standardization bodies. It's exactly the same companies that you find, everywhere. So, it's really an issue that the Commission has on its radar, but it has not found a solution yet. But more broadly, yes, you could criticize are technical standards the right tool to manage risk related to fundamental rights. That's arguably, the best, not the best tool, but what is the alternative? The alternative, in any case, needs to be something, where the industry has a say, because you cannot just come up with something impractical. But how do you make sure that, fundamental rights are respected in the implementation? Well, that's a bigger question for me to answer, to be honest.
Yeah. But building on this idea of effectiveness of the technical standards, and the possibility that despite the observation of those technical standards, harm, typically discrimination, might still occur. We now have the AI Liability Directive proposal and the proposal for revision of the Product Liability Directive. I don't know how much you followed those two proposals, but just in case, I wanted to ask your opinion on those, and whether they, on a procedural level, also give consumers, the procedural means that they need in order to have their rights protected, in the field of AI under the AI Act. What do you think?
I think that the AI Liability Directive has been hugely overestimated because it has AI in the name, and the Product Liability Directive has been hugely underestimated because AI and software more generally are products. according to EU law. And this law has been finalized now. It should enter into force soon, and will have to be transposed. But I think the PLD will be hugely influential in how consumers will have a legal standing to sue. And it's not only for physical damages, it's also psychological harm, and that could be hugely influential if you consider AI systems that, like ChatGPT, where there have been cases of suicide. So, and I think that the PLD will give rise to a lot of collective claims. We are only starting to see that emerge in Europe. I think it will be a growing trend, and the PLD will give the means for consumers to start private enforcement. And in a sense, that's already what we have seen with the GDPR, where national regulators do not act. You have private enforcement coming in, and I think that will be more and more influential in the coming years.
Okay, so you would say that the PLD or the ALD and the PLD together might indeed provide the sufficient procedural abilities to potential litigants in the future, to have harms compensated, etc.
Well, the ALD is a moving target. I'm only talking about the PLD because that's a done deal. And, there are lots of interesting stuff in there in terms of reversing the burden of proof, scientific complexity, the idea of damage that includes psychological harm. It's quite broad. And I think that, the private sector, software companies missed the train on the PLD. They didn't realize how consequential it will be, and I think that we will see that in the near future.
Okay. So a couple of final questions. You are, I mentioned at the beginning, thanks to you, we now have a relatively comprehensive version of the AI Act as it currently stands. And so what motivated you to share this document with the world, actually? Because if I'm not mistaken, it was you shared it on LinkedIn, correct? Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's the fact is that there has been a lot of public attention to this, and the EU legislative process is not very transparent, especially in the last phase. Parallel that will make you laugh, but it feels like at the airport where you have maximum security throughout the entire flight, and then you arrive at the baggage where you claim the baggage, and it's free for all. Take whatever you want. And it feels a bit like that at the trilogue stage. It's like you have process, transparency throughout the entire thing, and then it's trilogue, and everyone says, okay, now we sit in a room, close doors, and you will find out when you find out. And that's why the role of journalists is so important in this process. And that the AI Act would have been published eventually, but of course there is a process. You have lawyer, linguists, and so on now that are looking at the text, but it probably would have been too late if their academic community, research communities spotted any mistake in the text that was unintended, for example. So I think, just for the sake of transparency, I think it was the right thing to do, to share it with the world, as you say. And then, yeah, because I published it, it was later on published also by the clean version was also published by a European Parliament official. So,
Yeah.
I do hope there will be more transparency in policy making at the EU level in the future, and that this is a start of that trend. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's left to the individual involved in the process to decide how much they want to share or not.
Okay. And so, shortly after the publication or the sharing with the world, dissemination, let's say, of the AI Act, you left your active. So I wanted to close with a word of prospection. What is next for you? What is your next challenge?
Unfortunately, I cannot share it yet, but you'll know soon. I'm taking 2 months sabbatical, and then I'll start back in April.
Okay. Well, look forward to hearing more from you. So Luca, thank you very much for this very insightful conversation. Wish you the best, and we will for sure follow your work, and hopefully we will have other opportunities where we can discuss how further issues pertaining to new technologies, AI, and what the EU is doing in that area.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching an episode of the JUST-AI Jean Monnet Podcast, brought to you by the team of the JUST-AI Jean Monnet Center of Excellence and supported by the European Commission through the Erasmus Plus program. Keep an eye out for upcoming podcast episodes where experts in the field of AI will delve into the significant risks posed by these technologies and propose potential solutions. Stay tuned for many exciting and insightful discussions to come.